Germany has decided to support Donald Trump and the United States' insistence that NATO go to 5% spending on military. A think tank is suggesting that Mark Carney's government fire tens of thousands of federal employees, and it appears as though the postal union is going to be left with no choice but to go on strike. All that and more. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. I'm your host. Let's open with the think tank piece. Got it from the National Post. Tens of thousands of federal public service jobs should be eliminated, think tank says. During the federal election, Mark Carney promised to cap the size of the federal workforce and not to cut public service employment. Prime Minister Mark Carney should take a page from the Chrétien government in 1994 and cut tens of thousands of bureaucrat jobs, urged the Montreal Economic Institute in a new paper published on Thursday. The economic think tank found that a program review like the one from 30 years ago would result in the elimination of about 64,000 federal government jobs. This would lead to a return of the pre-Justin Trudeau government per capita size of the bureaucracy and a permanent reduction in public spending of nearly $10 billion. The size of the Canadian public service once again requires attention, despite the government belatedly acknowledging the need to restrain the growth of the federal bureaucracy and more decisive action is required, said the associate researcher at the MEI that produced the report. Mark Carney is already in trouble for suggesting that many of the jobs that are being handled by low-level and mid-level bureaucrats can be taken over by AI and various software programs. Now, I tell you right now, we need less AI and not more of it. I get that you might need it for doing, your chat GTP, but I can't stand calling the government and getting put onto a computer that's trying to recognize my voice. And then it gives me a whole bunch of leading questions so that they can try to figure out how I'm talking. It sickens me to think that we got all these people, every human being in the whole continent, it seems like 9 years and older, has a cell phone in their pocket. And we make the communications between humans less and less possible every day. Now, I understand that maybe we should be using AI to streamline the Liberal government's lack of the budget or the way that they spend their money. Now, that's a good idea. But I just don't know that we have the economy to start letting 64,000 people out of work with no job to go to. I mean, when they did it in Argentina, at least he was creating jobs and lifting many millions of people, or thousands and thousands of people out of poverty. Here, if we do it, we're likely to bankrupt all of the major cities because there'll be so many people released in Montreal, Vancouver, Toronto, Quebec City, and all the rest of it, right? So I get that AI is important, though right now, as it stands, Canada is relying heavily on American AI, which is true to form. And Mark Carney doesn't seem to be talking about any way that we should be starting those AI plants that he talked about when he speaks about the energy, the electricity revolution that he hopes to bring to Canada. Picking up a story from the CBC from Hamilton, it seems that the water union has gone on strike. Hamilton water operators go on strike demanding better pay from the city. The city says water will continue to be delivered despite the labor disruption. Operators who run Hamilton's water and wastewater plant went on strike Wednesday after negotiations with the city fell through. At the Woodward Avenue treatment plant, 54 workers are picketing, said Greg Hoth, business manager of the International Union of Operating Engineers Local 772, on behalf of the Ontario Water Employee Action. They oversee the water purifying process as well as the discharge of wastewater, he said. Of course, there's a lot of city people saying, the management saying, City Hall saying, oh, no, we respect them and all the rest of that. And here's a couple of the demands. At the same time, workers have faced two major issues that haven't been addressed for 2 decades. The first is operators are required to get 4 level 3 certifications, but are paid less than a different group of workers who are only required to have a quote-unquote level 1 certification. The union wants to close that gap by increasing the pay of its members by 6% over 4 years. The second issue is that if operators want to reach the top pay rate, they have to undergo on-the-job training, but it can take the city as long as 10 years to facilitate it. We're looking for fairness within the city itself, he said. I told the city last night, we're here, you call, we'll come. Well, I just think that it's kind of indicative of the situations that are happening all over the country, right? Especially now that the crunch is about to come, the recession is about to hit pretty hard. Southern Ontario is going to be one of the worst hit regions in the whole continent, based solely and completely on the inactivity of many of the politicians of Ontario and, of course, the federal politicians having destroyed the economy for the last 10 years and are well on their way to doing more of the same. So it doesn't surprise me that many unions all over the country are decided that they've had enough. And come on, man, you know what I mean? Like, if you want to give the guy the training and not give him the job, that's one thing. But to tell him, yeah, you can have the job, just wait 10 years and we'll give you the training, that's ridiculous. That is just unrealistic expectation. And I get that 6% is not that bad of a raise when you consider the idea that they're being paid less than people who are less qualified than they are. That's kind of insulting as well. So you need to sort of treat them properly, in my opinion. And once you treat them properly, they will treat you back properly. I mean, that's what unions typically tend to do. Ontario is building a small modular reactor in southern Ontario so that it can help provide power to upwards to 300,000 homes. They don't mention any businesses in this article, but Clarington, with electricity demand in Ontario set to soar by at least 75% by 2050, the Ontario government has approved Ontario Power Generation's plan to begin construction on the first of 4 small modular reactors at the Darlington nuclear site. Once complete, the SMRs will be the first of their kind in the G7, producing enough reliable, affordable, and clean electricity to power the equivalent of 300,000 homes, supporting thousands of good-paying jobs across the province and helping secure Ontario's energy supply for decades to come. They figured it'll give about 18,000 jobs and give maybe 500 million to the economy. There's a whole host of things in there that they don't discuss. First of all, they say houses, but I mean, really, shouldn't we be talking about all the power it's going to require to make the cars that, like the electricity for the electric vehicles that nobody is building, but the Liberal government is demanding that all the provinces adhere to? Should we not also be thinking about maybe some of our own AI systems and how much electricity they require? I mean, from what I can put together, they require the same electricity that is generated to give about 75 to 150,000 houses. That's what requires for one AI quantum computing system. And so, like, this press release saying, oh, look, well, and I'll leave a link in the description. Oh, look, we're going to be able to supply 300,000 homes, but are you going to be able to supply them with the charging station built right into the driveway? Are you going to be able to provide them with, like the charging stations at the grocery stores? I mean, where are we building this infrastructure for all of these electric cars that the far left eco-maniacs are demanding out of Canadians while they drive around in chauffeur-driven V8s? Nonetheless, they are putting it into law, legislation, and many of the people in the country elected them. So can we try to understand how that's going to impact the production of this particular nuclear site? Maybe we could say that by doing 2 of them, we can give 1 directly over to infrastructure, because I don't see any of that in this press release. And that indicates a very short-sighted approach to this, let me build a nuclear power plant. However, if it gives 18,000 jobs like they say, or even if it gives 10,000 because they've overestimated, at least it's a lot of work, a little bit of work for people in the neighborhood, and many of those jobs will be long term. So that's also something to consider, especially now with Southern Ontario about to be so hard hit by the Carney tariffs and the idea that the Liberal government wants to have a fist fight instead of doing something that it will change the way the Canadians' future is going to be vis-a-vis the economy and real jobs and fossil fuels and all of the things that the rest of the world is getting rich on, while we look around at our forests to see if we can get enough branches to build a hut. Pick this up from the CBC. The military vehicles and aircraft en route to Kananaskis Info Center opens ahead of G7. Smaller G7 finance ministers meeting set for Banff in late May. So right now, because the G7 is coming, we're sending, our military to the Kananaskis region to be set and to be put into place. Some of them are going to be our planes and all of the guys we have with our high-powered slingshots. and all of the poor guys on the ground that are going to stand there and watch as militaries come from other parts of the world with better equipment, and oftentimes equipment made in Canada that they have that our own people do not have. This is the kind of thing that we should be expecting from our Liberal government, who invests nothing in military and relies heavily on the idea that strategically anybody trying to take over Canada with the military would have to come face to face with the United States military, the same United States that everybody voted against just a couple of weeks ago. So it's kind of a contradiction that people would think to themselves, I don't like Donald Trump, but I sure do like the Marines and all of the jets, and I like all of the aircraft carriers and all the rest of it. It's a real pick and choose sort of idea on how the Canadian population wants to think about the American government. Sticking with the military, I picked this up from the CBC. Apparently now all of a sudden we're putting on a big show. Canada's military plans to be in the Arctic on a near permanent basis, says the commander, expanding northern training programs to 10 months. Brings opportunities to rally support from NATO allies. So essentially what you're saying is that anybody could land an army there, and they got 2 months to pull it off. Excellent. Well, I guess if we went for 6 months, they would only have a 1 month window if we went every 5 months. So we can limit it, I suppose. Canada intends to expand its military training regime in the Arctic, deploying a variety of forces in the region for up to 10 months a year starting this year, the military operations commander says. Lieutenant General Stephen Boivin says the military's signature Far North exercises, Operation Nanook, will see additional elements created, resulting in greater consistent presence in the region that is increasingly the focus of geopolitical rivalry. Now, for those of you that may not be aware, what we are talking about is Russia, Greenland, China, everybody wanting access to the north, primarily because it is a spectacular shipping lane that they have been able to figure out a way through most of the time of the year. It cuts off weeks in some cases. So we as the country of Canada really need to reevaluate how we go about this. And it's one of the primary reasons that the United States keeps talking about the strategic acquisition of Greenland, which I kind of agree that Canada should be up north. However, I don't know necessarily that putting 15 guys in snowsuits and snowmobiles is the answer. What we really need to be doing is cranking out ships like there's no tomorrow. It should be so thick with ships on our various coasts that people can't turn left without seeing yet another one. And that's the secret to this military that we need to be talking about. We need to be doing it from the outside in. We need to be doing it from the inside out. We need to be tackling this problem like we care about this country. We have infrastructure issues. I mean, imagine in your mind what would happen if for some reason we tried to send military units up north. Right now, we would only be able to get them there a couple of plane loads at a time. It doesn't really work out the way that you would think that it does, and other countries have massive abilities to move huge amounts of troops to one region, from one region, and all the rest of it. Before we look at Germany's support of America's insistence that we go to 5% spending for NATO military, let's take a look at this looming postal strike now. Full disclosure, I have spoken to a couple of individuals that I know who work in that union, and they are telling me that it looks like a done deal, that as it stands right now, the government is not willing to meet their demands, and the union is telling all of them to prepare for a strike. However, let's have a look at what the official release is from the Postal Union. And, I say that, but in all of these cases, there's oftentimes fast-moving things that are transpiring well outside the understanding of the rank and file, which is where I would have, had my information provided to me from. On May the 13th, the Canada Post Union put this up on the website. Negotiation pause to reset discussion and focus on resolution, which is essentially saying nobody's budging. After several days of discussion without meaningful progress, Canada Post has informed the Canadian Union of Postal Workers that a temporary pause in discussion is necessary. This pause will allow Canada Post to focus on preparing comprehensive proposals aimed at moving discussions forward constructively. Negotiation resumed at the end of April after breaking off in March, while CUPW requested that both parties return to the table with the assistance of a mediator. The union has either held or hardened its previous position on key issues, leaving little room for progress. The collective agreement for the the CUPW represented employees extended until May 22nd, 2025. We understand that our employees and that the people we serve are counting on both parties to find a resolution and avoid further labor disruption. Canada Post has therefore advised the CUPW that it will use this pause to prepare proposals designed to help advance negotiations and achieve a much needed resolution. Any offers we bring forward will reflect the corporation's current realities. We recognize the significant challenges facing the corporation and remain committed to adopting the evolving needs of Canadians. At the same time, we are focused on protecting and enhancing the wages and benefits that are important to our people. What this means for our business. We had hoped a new collective agreement would be reached by this point, but without new agreements, there is a possibility of a labor disruption on or after May 22nd. We know the ongoing uncertainty is challenging for our business and understand you need to make plans for your business operations. Your business requires certainty in our ability to provide reliable service. We want to be able to provide the assurance, but we are preparing for all possible outcomes. We recognize that you need to prepare as well. Being able to provide you with certainty remains our priority. We are committed to keeping you informed so you can plan and prepare accordingly. Now, that was the last post that was put up by Canada Post. Remember, that was put up by the government side of the table, and the union itself is simply drafting lines and getting it ready to go. This will be a bit of a problem for most businesses that are relying on Canada Post to get their product delivered. Now, remember, we're talking about a time where everything is delivered to the house. I mean, the amount of companies that got started and were relying on deliveries during the COVID lockdown has really sort of manifested itself right across the entire infrastructure. So with the government actually not taking the steps after having kicked this negotiation down you'll remember they were going on strike in December, and the government took them to court and forced them to go back to work until May, 6 months down the road, where they felt that everything would be stabilized and they would have a deal by that time. However, from the postal union side, now all of the major mail, like the serious mail, has gone by, with Mother's Day being the last one. And there won't really be another significant one until Christmas comes again. And so the union is a little bit angry about that, a little bit. They saw what was happening, of course, and transpired, and they couldn't do much about it. So now we see that the government is trying to play hardball. I don't know that it's a good idea for the Mark Carney government to not succumb, or at least acquiesce to the demands of the union, based on the idea that he doesn't even want to put forward a budget. So I don't know that he wants a lot of scrutiny from the parliament on this particular issue. One of the things that you should not be doing when you're a government with precarious position who's losing more and more support every single day is upset one of the major unions, because this union is the one that looks after many of the regions where other companies do not go. This union is where they go, where it's forest most of the road, and they go to small towns, and they go to where the post office is not only the post office, but it doubles as a gas station and a grocery store. Like it's rural parts of the country that we need to be looking at here, and how the impact on those businesses and on those places will be significant. Not to mention the idea that companies are now going to have to try and find temporary renegotiations of some deliveries. This is a serious thing, and the government should not be dragging its feet on it. I don't understand some of the moves that are coming out of this Carney government. Well, I would understand it if they were looking to like cause chaos, then that makes a lot of sense. Otherwise, if they're looking to follow through on the nationalist approach of their platform under the most recent campaign, well, there's nothing that ties together. What ties the country together more than the postal union? I would say also that the DHL Express Canada members voted 97% in favor of a strike on the 10th of May. And that's significant in one way for sure, is because they were part of the union of Unifor, who is also going to be grumbling about the auto sector being moved out of Canada with the Liberal government and the Conservative in name only government sitting on their hands while that entire industry, while the Southern Ontario was gutted. Houses are no longer able to meet their mortgages, and people lose their cars, and their children start to have to move into, the ripples and the ramifications are quite severe. And again, I don't know that you want to have this union all of a sudden having part of them on strike with another section of them being very disgruntled. This could not, this could snowball into a big problem for the Carney government. And now I'll talk to one of the bigger problems that the Carney government is going to experience with this push from NATO supported by Germany. You'll remember that Donald Trump has been saying the whole time that Canada does not contribute enough to the military infrastructure of NATO. And Mark Carney relies heavily on NORAD protecting our northern border. So there's a lot of resentment coming out of the United States towards Canada's military contribution. Now, Mark Carney tries to counter that by saying, no, well, we give a lot of money to Ukraine. However, that's not anywhere near what the NATO military requirement is. I mean, if for whatever reason Russia invades us over the Arctic, do you think that we can write them a check? We need to have military to stand in the way is the point I'm making, not throwing any suspicion on Russia, blah, blah, blah. However, Germany has decided to agree with Donald Trump that 5% spending on military budget is a good idea. And I picked this up from the Financial Times. Germany backs Donald Trump's goal for NATO to spend 5% GDP on defense. Foreign minister signals Berlin will commit to 3.5% in hard, quote unquote, military spending and 1.5% for infrastructure by 2032. So Canada has already been struggling to try to meet the 2% by 2031 is what we have in our current budget. And here's Germany, a country that's much smaller than us, but with nowhere near the natural resources that we possess, committing to go into 3.5% in hard. By hard, they mean, tanks on the ground, guns, bullets, all the, shells, planes, all the things like that. And then the infrastructure to move it around, because like I keep telling everybody, we need this country to be tied together with something that can move it, which is why I told you that we need a magnetic levitation, because you don't have to worry about the weather when a magnetic levitation runs. And you can be darn sure that when Germany's talking about the infrastructure for the 1.5%, they're talking about using trains to move their military around. Maybe a couple of boats, but primarily it's going to be trains. Germany has signaled it will raise defense spending in line with the U.S. President Donald Trump's request for NATO members to reach 5% GDP as conservative Chancellor Friedrich Merz vows to turn I don't even know. He's going to turn the German military into Europe's strongest military. Speaking at a meeting in Antalya on Thursday, German Foreign Minister Johann Wadelpfl said Berlin was following Trump in his demand that NATO allies reach 5% goal. Currently, the alliance has 2% spending target. And I will leave a link to this description. However, I think that it's important to understand that Germany is now bending the knee to Donald Trump. This is a position that they have flipped on, because they're a far left socialist government who doesn't believe in spending, military or otherwise. And now all of a sudden you see them saying, no, we're going to meet that 5%. And you're sitting there asking yourself, well, what is that? Why would that matter? But that's because they want to signify to the United States that they are on board, in lockstep with what the Americans and the British have put together. And so pick Germany for all of your trade while you're going over to Ukraine, pulling up all of those rare earth minerals. In fact, you know what? If you want, we can rent you a section of our country and you can go ahead and process all of that stuff right in here. What? Oh no, we only want 50% of the jobs to be local. Because unlike Mark Carney, these individuals understand the way the world is going, the way the world is earning money, and how they want to pull their struggling economy, just like many of the far left economies of Europe, out of the proverbial gutter, for lack of a better word, and they are signifying to the United States that they are willing to do business on an understanding that the Americans want. So you give them the 5% trade, then they turn around and say, you know what, you're right, let's do business on other aspects and other things.
This is, of course, what Canada is not doing. And this, of course, will be a problem for Mark Carney, because Germany in NATO holds a lot of weight. There are a lot of countries that will, like, you know, Germany can put 5 or 7 countries in with their one little vote, if you follow what I'm saying. Then you have the Americans already saying that that's what we want. So now the next time they get together, it'll be everybody has to do it, right? We're putting it forward, and now we're going to sign it, we're going to get it ratified and all the rest of it. Mark Carney's government will be tripping over themselves to try to get to the 2% that they can say by 2031. There ain't no way in the world they're going to find the money for 5%, because we're not generating any money. We don't have any economy, and we have borrowed every buck that we can borrow. Mark Carney is so flat broke, he doesn't even want to put forward a budget. This could really bite Canada, or at least the Liberal government, really hard, you know? And despite all of what you might hear from the Carney government, the world is going this direction. If they weren't going this direction, we wouldn't hear so much agreement from Germany. We would hear, oh, no, we're not doing the right thing. But this is NATO getting together, sitting down in Turkey, looking at the military that's being generated in in Russia, looking at the military that's being generated in China, who now is up to 7 aircraft carriers, looking at the military being generated in parts of the Middle East, looking at all of this military like Iran or any, you know, countries like that. And they're all of a sudden saying, you know what, we really should have, you know, kind of keep our garden full of protection here. All the while, Canada's running around trying to act like the 15 guys we sent up north is a big deal. I just really believe that, you see, the thing is that if the Carney government wasn't in the way, if it was the Conservative government, then I would be telling you it's fine, because we're going to start ripping all this material out of the ground, and we're just going to throw up munitions factories left, right, and center. That guy's going to make Jeeps. We'll make the Jeeps in you know, Ontario. We'll make the tanks in Manitoba. We'll make the bullets in PEI. I mean, but the Carney government doesn't want any of that coming out of the ground. So they are going to be relying heavily on the Americans to protect us, because they themselves don't want to do the same. They don't want to do what's necessary to be able to remove ourselves from the reliance of the Americans, which is kind of a weird situation when you consider how many times coming out of their mouth they talk about how they're out to protect Canada from the Americans. But this is what happens when they see, this is what happens, right? When you talk out of both sides of your mouth or out of your face, or whatever that expression is. When you say, you know, conflicting stories, they have to come back and you know, they're going to cause you a lot of issues, because neither side works together. At least when you were talking to the Conservatives, they had only one position, whereas the Liberals are up to 3-4 positions, depending on who they were talking to. And that is now starting to coalesce into something that is going to be causing them to look bad no matter which way they turn. You let me know what you think. Do you believe that I'm being a little bit critical, or should we be ripping out these things and having a military that rivals at least that of Germany? I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.